Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Got an interesting email. Going to start the day with the favorites in the email front. I got both the Butt Hillary and the Butt Nancy. Evidently, the Butt Hillary thing's back because what we find out, look, I think all of us knew all along that Trump was shredding stuff because it's how he ran his business. It's that mentality. You never put anything in writing. You never record anything. Like a good mafia don would. No evidence, and the evidence that's there, get rid of. So now that that's going around, and the Trump supporters have to figure out how to defend that. It's now Butt Hillary. Butt Hillary. Emails. She's got all those emails. Remember the emails? Yeah, I also remember that she testified for 11 hours under intense scrutiny. I don't think the former guy could have done 5 minutes without losing his stack. And then, doing what he did recently, incriminating himself. The Fifth Amendment was made for guys like him who can't stop talking. And my grandfather used to always say, you have the right to remain silent. You should probably use it. And at this point, he should probably use it. I'm going there. But I also got the Butt Nancy email because, we're going to justify, Trump shredding everything and doing the things that we're now finding out he did because, Hillary had emails on a private server that evidently Jared, Ivanka, and half of the Trump team did as well. But no, we're not gonna talk about that. But the Butt Nancy was great because Nancy Pelosi, you may remember this, a couple years back, Trump gave his State of the Union address and Nancy tore the speech up. And this person was like, well, you didn't say anything. And I go, you clearly didn't check the archives. You should go back and check the archives and find that date because I said a lot. And I said that I applauded her. I thought, hey, it sent the right statement for that speech and it was not illegal. This is the part that you seem to not getting. It's not illegal. It wasn't an official document. We're talking about presidential records that Trump ripped up, that somebody had to walk around with Scotch tape and tape all this stuff up. And now the 15 boxes plus whatever's still there in Mar-a-Lago. Where's the hearing? Where's the 11 hours of intense scrutiny over what he did with the records? That's what I want to know. Now, on the Nancy part, and this is where, again, facts kind of matter. What she tore up was not the official, archived copy. It was a photocopy. It was an extra. I could have gotten it off the internet. And in fact, I think I actually did. I think I got it and I read it. And I do believe, now that I think about it, I think I ripped it up too. So I got to wonder now, am I going to be charged with a crime under the Presidential Records Act? Of course not. Because I'm not president. I should be. I absolutely should be. But here's the thing. And this is where the fun is. And I know the Trumpkin crowd, they don't get nuance. I know they don't get I know it's tough for them. But, the bigger thing was the speech was bad. She sent a statement. Wasn't an official record. And Hillary's emails. Evidently, that's our day. Hillary's emails. I thought, I think that's going to stick with us for a very long time. Because that's all they got. That's when it's that that instant, that automatic response. That it's like blinking. They you say something that the bad he did and it's wrong and it's illegal. No, emails. It's like that kind of the Hillary email tick that they've got going on. Yeah, a big fun on that front. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you buy the Butt Hillary stuff? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Hey, maybe the emails are that important. Maybe it's not important. Now, interesting, Mitch McConnell had came out today, and now McConnell said from the beginning that what happened on January 6th was wrong, and he's been somewhat on the right side of it. But he came out today and he said that what happened on January 6th was a violent insurrection. The purpose of that violent insurrection was to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. He said this, and he goes, look, it was what it was. Now, do I believe what comes out of his pie hole? No. I would actually, probably put more credence if words came out of the other side. I take nothing that Mitch McConnell says as factual or truth or right. I find his, this is the game. Everything about him is positioning. And the reason I say this is because it's interesting that he chose, today to say this. After you had the Mike Pence speech, in his safe space in front of the Federalist Society, how much safer can you get than in front of a bunch of, far right-wing conservative lawyers? So he came out and he had his statement on what happened on January 6th. And that was kind of, that trial balloon, that testing the waters kind of thing. And then you had Chris Christie we talked about yesterday. And now you got Mitch McConnell coming out. Now, like I said, I believe nothing that they say because they're political opportunists. These are not basically honest people. They're going to pursue a path that they think is going to keep them in power. So forget the words. Forget the fact that they've come out against the former guy and are now taking a position that it was what it was, to use McConnell's words. They're reading the tea leaves. This is the only thing that I can come up with. That they are seeing that, either, Trump's not doing well. Last time I saw him, he's looking a little ragged, looking a little rough. And then there's the in kind of fighting that you're beginning to see with the DeSantis crowd and then the establishment crowd, the Pence, the Christies, and the McConnells. Now you're seeing kind of like a three-way split. This could be even more fun to watch a menage a trois of destruction. Might be quite interesting. And it might actually play to the benefit of the Democrats this election. But in watching McConnell and listening to the words, I know a lot of people want to rush and go, good for him for 5. No, don't do that. Do not do it. Don't give him the benefit of the doubt of him actually believing the words coming out of his mouth or caring. This is the problem I think this administration has. I think the Biden administration has this problem with the Senate because Joe was there for so long that he sees these people as buddies and contemporaries and drinking guys. Back when they were younger, they did some elbow lifts, they did some tilts. This ain't the same crowd, not the same Republican Party that when he was in office. It's not. Much crazier. So the fundamental misunderstanding that these people care about democracy, care about institutions, care about the rule of law, they don't. And care about we the people, they certainly don't. I'm not going to whisper that one. This is who they are. And like the Maya Angelou quote, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. Republicans have been telling us who they are for a couple of decades now. And this is where I think the failure of Joe Biden has been to believe them. They didn't do what they did with Barack Obama. They didn't come out and say, I hope he fails. We're going to make him a one-term president. They didn't have to. Because it's who they are now. They are the party of no. They are the party of obstruction. They are the party of gridlock. They're the party of status quo. Because you know what? The wealthy are thrilled with the way things are. They are thrilled because they're making tons of money. And until we wake up to this reality, we're going to continue to get more of the same. So look, I'm not buying the Mitch McConnell thing at all. But I thought I had to get that out there because, it's just one of those moments where you go, I know someone's going to go, oh, Mitch McConnell's doing such a good thing. It's kind of like, they give, other people credit for coming forward. Oh, the obvious is obvious. And then you go, oh, hey, good for you. No, none of that. This is pure political calculus. Just my thoughts. And I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So today is Child Tax Credit Day of Action. This is the day of action. They want to raise awareness to the fact that American families do qualify for the $3,000 or the $3,600 per child, depending on age. If they're younger, the $3,600. If they're I think 6 and older, it's $3,000. And you've got to file your taxes to make sure that you hold on to it. And the place where you go to do that tax thing that we all have to do every year is childtaxcredit.gov. You go there, file your stuff, find out if you're eligible. Tax filing deadline's April 18th. But here's the thing. They went around, they had a virtual shindig today with the vice president and the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Gene Sperling, one of the White House advisors, was there, and they're talking about, hey, go do this, and we need to get this money into folks' hands to help low-income families and all that stuff. And, they highlight the fact that we've cut childhood poverty by, more than 40% just with this one little program. And now that it's stopped, obviously I think that goes the other way, right? I mean, I think now you're looking at a scenario where, as I've talked about, a cruel kind of scenario where now you had these kids who, they got used to having food at the end of the month, and now they're like, I guess nothing. And this is where the frustrating part of this comes in, because Joe Manchin doesn't seem ready to move on it. And today the idea, the day of action idea, is you contact people. Contact the Joe Manchins of the world, contact the Kirsten Sinemas, contact Republicans. If you're in an area with a Republican senator, there's no reason that Joe Manchin can't be Mr. Irrelevant, because you just need one Republican to replace him, to say, you know what, I think kids should eat at the end of the month. I think there should be something on the table. So by all means do that. And if you need to find out if you're eligible, childtaxcredit.gov is that website that you can then take a look at. And look, we're seeing the research. The studies are popping out how, they've cut poverty, how, the one that, if you feed babies, I know this is shocking. This is a shocker. So if you're driving, hold on, slow down. Don't let the wheel go crazy. And if you're standing, by all means, sit. If you feed babies, they have better brain activity. I know, right? Shocking. Higher brain activities when children get fed. Wow. Mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. But yeah, this is where we are. So by all means, do that. Contact someone. Good news, and we're going to talk about this in the second hour today. President Biden, you may remember back in April of last year, signed Executive Order 14025. This was to establish a task force. I love task force. The Worker Organizing and Empowerment Task Force. Who could be against worker organizing and empowerment? Certainly not me. Now, what it did, it set up this task force, a bunch of people from labor, business, all kinds of stuff. Bring all these people together with the purpose of increasing union membership. That's it. That's the goal. Now, that was Kamala Harris's charge. They now have a 45-page, 70 policy proposal paper. It is online. It's easy to find. You just look up that incredible name of Worker Organizing and Empowerment, and it will come up. This is going to be one of those things that is going to help make it easier. This is what their goal is. Make it easier for federal workers to join and form unions, to make it easier for federal contractors to unionize. And, the hope is, that if you push this report and you move it down the road, you expand the goals nationally, not just to the federal government, but to all workers, this could be very helpful. And this idea that government should be the model employer is something I've talked about for years. If we're spending our tax dollars to, whatever the service is, whatever the building project is, whatever we're using in the name of we the people, it should be lifting conditions up. It should be doing it for everyone. We shouldn't be taking care of our veterans by cheating our workers, or vice versa. We shouldn't be paving our roads and cheating our workers out of prevailing wage. We shouldn't be doing those things. We should be the public sector should be the high road, where we lift people up and things get better, so that there's an option. Again, the right loves to talk about competition, yet they don't want to compete with decent wage public sector jobs, of which I've always said should be the employer of last resort if there aren't enough private sector jobs. Now, in the paper, they came up with the alligator jaws of inequality. It's getting worse. The haves a whole lot more than the have-nots, and there are things that we should be doing. Now, understand, this report is just a bunch of suggestions. These are not laws. We need Congress to pass something. We need the PRO Act desperately. And sadly, given our political realities, these will remain simple suggestions. And, where the president can use executive orders on federal contractors, he will do. But we need to organize, and we, us, you, me, we need to demand better. Because the reality is, 68% of workers approve of unions right now, pretty much an all-time high. And even 52% of non-union workers are going, hey, I think I'd like to join a union. And we need to make it easier. We need to encourage it. And to me, the reason I voted for Joe Biden, that is the goal. That is the way forward. I got lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to take a quick break right back after this. If you missed any of the program, just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Take the podcast on the go wherever you go. Also, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day copper miners in Butte, Montana went out on strike. Mine owners announced a $1 a day wage cut when copper prices slumped in the financial markets. Swayed by the power of the Seattle General Strike then in progress, miners associated with the industrial workers of the world, and the Metal Mine Workers Union Local 800 formed their own Soldiers, Sailors, and Workers Council. They issued a call for a general strike. For days, area trade unionists honored picket lines, left their jobs, and held meetings to debate joining a general strike. The streetcar workers shut down public transportation for 5 days. Soldiers returning from the war helped to man the picket lines. The labor paper Butte Daily Bulletin reported the post-war economy had left returning war heroes penniless and working in dangerous mines. While solidarity was unanimous among workers, their unions had yet to pass formal resolutions. Immediately, Montana's Governor Sam V. Stewart called in the 44th Infantry to crush the strike. Infantrymen bayoneted 9 strikers when they tried to stop the anti-labor Butte Daily Post from being distributed. Spirits were high by the end of the first week as official voting began. Then the streetcar men went back to work, citing no grievances with their employer. Then the engineers followed. Finally, the IBEW caved. They worried the engineers would take their jobs as they had done in the 1917 strike. The IWW and Local 800 called off the strike, fearing continuation would be fatal. Though most of the troops were soon withdrawn, one company stayed to ensure labor peace at the local water and electric works. Butte would remain under federal military occupation until the end of 1920. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. So, I'm driving earlier today. This is one of those things that, quite remarkable to me anyway. I'm driving and listen to the radio as you do. And an ad comes on. Or it's not really an ad. It's one of those official sounding kind of newsy things. The kind of, the investigative report of stuff. Breaking tragedy news. What will Pennsylvania do as teachers are nowhere to be found? How will our children get an education? The education they so desperately need as people are leaving the classroom. How will we staff our classrooms? Solutions at 5. And I'm going, this is brilliant. They've created a crisis. They're highlighting the crisis, going, oh, how bad this is. And then they're going to come up with their crummy solutions, which are already, laying around in their think tanks. Quite remarkable. And you look at all this stuff going on, these attacks on teachers everywhere. This is all in my view, part of a big master plan to destroy public education. And here to share some thoughts on some of this, I've asked Randi Weingarten to come talk with us. Randi is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, AFT.org, their website. Randi, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. So I'm looking, like I said, I'm hearing this ad on the radio. And, they're saying, that's horrible. All the teachers are leaving and there's no one in the classrooms. We can't do all this stuff. And, solutions at 5. And I'm going, yeah, there are ways we could, I don't know, we could attract teachers if we really wanted to. Maybe stop harassing them.
Yeah, respect them. Make this, people, this is what's so amazing. First off, Rick, thank you for having me. But this is what's so amazing about this. I've been at a conference all day today, NABE, the National Association of Bilingual Educators. Come from around the country, first in-person conference. People so dedicated to teaching lived experience and to really enlarging the tent and making sure that America does what America always does, which is to, try to value diversity and initiative and things like that. And what do teachers do? They basically, see this in kids and make a difference in kids and make sure that these kids actually, see their destiny and see who they are.
Yeah.
And that's who teachers are. And what we should be doing is we should respect that, and we should give them the tools and conditions they need and the salaries they need to actually reward the amazing job that they do for kids each and every day. And instead, we just make their jobs harder and harder and harder and harder. And what a shock. We have a big shortage right now. And what a shock at the time that kids need their teachers the most. Teachers have been disrespected the most.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could set up a hotline for that. Maybe we could use that Glenn Youngkin line. Maybe we could bury that line.
Yeah, exactly. Which is what people have. This is what's so bizarre about this moment in time. And we've just done some polling of parents. 80% of parents in the United States of America believe that teachers worked really hard. 78% of parents believe that their kids' teachers, have done a good to great job. 72% of parents believe that their schools have done a good to great job. And literally 78% of parents believe that their schools last year opened basically too soon or just about right. Only 22% of parents believe that their schools didn't open soon enough. So when you look at statistics like this from around the country, from a deep dive of what parents' real attitude of belief is, as opposed to the Glenn Youngkins or the politicians of the world, you see that parents really value what their teachers are doing, and you see that teachers are working incredibly hard to help kids. And all of that is the way it should be, and we should be making sure that we could do more of that.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting to me is, this group, Penn America, their job is to track, education progress, and they're tracking these educational gag orders that are going around. And they've reported that since January of last year, there are 122 of these educational gag orders that have been filed or pre-filed in 33 states. 12 have become law in 10 states. And there are 88 of them currently going on right now. And the one I talked about last night was the one in Oklahoma, where now they're talking about suing teachers for, if you have a religiously held belief, you can sue for 10 grand per incident per individual, and not the school, not you, the union, but the individual teacher in a state that is funded 47th in the country and has children getting ready for college at 1 out of 5 rate. And this is the stuff that they choose to do on education, not making sure there are desks and books and resources and extracurricular activities or better paid teachers. No, it's this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, so let me just make sure that all your listeners who are teachers know, if you're a member of the AFGE, the AFGE will always defend our members in terms of the teaching of honest history and in terms of making these sites. We will always have people's back, because this is a moment that having people's back are far more important than just the teaching. It's about also the democracy. And so think about what's going on here. And you and I have had these conversations before. What are the ways that people actually have power and agency in the country? Regular folks have power and agency. You have it by voting, you have it through public education, and you have it through labor. What are these states doing in terms of the undermining of teaching? How many of these states have put these kind of proposals out there? Same in terms of voting. How many of these same exact states have tried to undermine voting? So what you're seeing here is essentially an ideological battle, a power battle dressed up as a cultural war to basically stop regular folks from having real power and agency over their lives.
Yep.
And that's what we got to fight against. So we're fighting against the book bans. We're fighting against trying to silence us from, teaching our kids honest history. And we're fighting to actually have the conditions that teachers need to make a difference in the lives of kids.
Yeah, can you believe we're seeing book burnings again? I mean, seriously.
No.
Can you believe that we're actually having to go through this again, where they're pulling books off of shelves that I guarantee you the people who are complaining about the books on the shelves never read the damn books?
No. I mean, last weekend I talked to a couple of reporters about 2 books. Mouse, which was written by the son of Holocaust survivors, who was actually a cartoon talking about and trying to explain what it's like to survive. And in that history, the mouse was the Jew, the cat was the German, and there's a cartoon about this to try to actually really capture the depiction of the Holocaust as genocide. And then, so that book was being banned. And that was an entire semester's worth of, or entire unit's worth of conversation for kids about what it's like to deal with genocide and how horrible genocide is. And this Tennessee group just said, no, we want to get rid of this entire curriculum. And then the second book, we've talked about Beloved before, but let's talk about Ruby Bridges. And this whole notion that it is uncomfortable to talk about the racism Ruby Bridges experienced because somebody might be uncomfortable with talking about racism against Ruby Bridges. Can you imagine just how uncomfortable Ruby Bridges was?
Exactly.
When she was basically breaking the racial barrier and integrating that. Could you imagine just how courageous she was and how uncomfortable it is, and how think, if you put yourself in her shoes, how we'd have a lot more empathy for each other. And the last was, I couldn't believe it. I taught To Kill a Mockingbird. This is an amazing book. It's an amazing movie now about what justice was like in some southern states, and to show that justice was not justice, and to do it in a way that kids could relate to other kids. I teach that book. I used to teach that book all the time in the 1990s.
Yeah, no, I read it in the 80s.
That is being book banned now. So what is all this about? No, it's about basically erasing lived experience and erasing history, just like the big lie is about erasing the facts. That's what's so dangerous about it.
Yeah. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT, AFT.org, the website. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at this. Now, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but I'm in this mindset that this is a well-funded, well-organized scheme to destroy public education as a whole. Because as you said, the way forward for people in society is to get an education, and it's the public's responsibility to make sure that that's there. So if you can use this good crisis that they're creating about that theory about critical something or other, then you can just tear the whole system down, privatize it, profitize it, and then only the deserving get it. And then, well, if you're not, fortunate enough, well, there's always ditch digging. That's my view on where this is taking us. And also, we want followers, not critical thinkers. And boy,
Right.
This seems to be working really well for them.
I think we're in a dangerous moment, and I would say, and I don't disagree with your theory in the main, but I think that what's happened is I would ask people who question what we should teach. Look, I used to tell the parents of my kids all the time, I wanted them to be involved. I sent out curriculums all the time. I wanted there to be transparency. I wanted them engaged. But what are people afraid of? Why are we afraid of kids having knowledge and engaging? And the bottom line is, kids are pretty facile with social media and with the internet. So if a book is banned, they're going to get that freaking book on Kindle.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to find it anyway. So if we can actually try and create a sense of shared community, particularly in the aftermath of COVID and after all of what we've been through, I just don't get what are people afraid of? Why are they afraid of their kids having, or why is anybody afraid of kids having, grasping, reaching, understanding, the good and the bad?
Yeah. No, back in 2015, we did a civil rights tour where, I took my kids, we went all across the South, and in every place where there was, horrible treatment of black people in this country, there's now a museum and historical sites and all kinds of stuff. There's no excuse not to understand history, especially today. And we went, and there was so many things that I learned that I didn't get an opportunity to learn in school. And there was nothing about it that made me feel that I was responsible. I felt terrible for these people. I felt horrible that this is the history. It wasn't my fault. But what I did take out of it is, how about we not do it again? And there's part of me that goes, I think there's a certain segment that goes, no, we want to do it again.
Well, I think there's a big shift in the country. The country, over the course of the next, 50 years, it's going to be more black and brown.
Yeah.
It's going to change, just like the country, at the turn of the 1900s became, there were more people here from Eastern Europe. There were more Jews, there were more Italians, and before that, there were more Irish. So the country always changes, and either we celebrate the diversity, like the Tolkien said, or we're afraid of it. And I think what's happening is you had a president in Trump who thought it was that his path to power was to divide rather than unify. And frankly, It's the first person in modern history in both political parties that did that. So you see now what's happening in terms of the Republican Party. Instead of celebrating, instead of vying about ideas about how to make things better for people, they are trying to shut a group of people out, including their own Republican Party members who believe in democracy and believe that when you hurt and kill police officers like violent protesters did on 1/6, that there should be accountability about it. So I think we're in a very dangerous moment, but I bet on Americans to actually come together and be able to beat back this moment of tremendous strife.
Yeah, we've got a lot of work to do, and look, the elections are going to be a huge part of this. So last question I've got for you, as a parent of kids who've gone through public school and are still going through there, who appreciates my kids' teachers, what do we do? What do the silent majority do? Because you're right, this is just a small segment, the loudest, the craziest. What do average people do?
Don't sit on the sidelines. This is so two things. Number one, thank you for saying that. And I was on Morning Joe earlier today, and one of the hosts, Willie Geist, turned around to me and Jonathan Lemire and talked about how amazing their kids' teachers had been to their kids, and that connection, that empathy, that relationship building. We need to lift that up, and we need to celebrate that, because that's what teachers do. And that's what our educators have done every single day during this pandemic. And so lifting that up and being intentional about lifting that up and is really important. Teachers need that right now, but society needs that to see that people are not alone.
Yep.
And then the second piece I would say is there are more people in this country who want change. They want a better life for themselves and their families. But we do that through democracy.
There you go.
And so don't sit on the sidelines.
Good
Vote
stuff.
This November.
Good stuff. Randy, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you.
Thanks.
Randy Weingarten, president of AFT, AFT.org, the website. Check that out. We'll take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that a 3-man American astronaut crew returned to Earth from an 84-day mission at the Skylab. They were the first crew to spend so long in low Earth orbit up until that time. The crew also returned with a different kind of first. They had launched the first space strike in history. The all-rookie crew was scheduled for an arduous work schedule at the space station. When one member fell ill, they began to fall behind schedule on their long list of tasks. From the ground, NASA Mission Control urged them to catch up by working through meals and scheduled rest times. Tensions mounted as the 3 men were monitored at every moment. The commander of the trip tried to explain the crew's exhaustion, saying, "On the ground, I don't think we would be expected to work 16 hours a day for 85 days. And so I really don't see why we should even try to do it up here." 6 weeks into the trip, the Skylab 4 crew had had enough. They turned off the communication radio connecting them to Earth. They took an unscheduled day off. When the communication link came back on, the commander issued the group's demands, saying, "We need more time to rest. We need a schedule that's not so packed. We don't want to exercise after a meal. We need to get things under control." NASA agreed to stop pushing so hard. The first space strike was over, and the mission went forward on better terms.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we did it. We did it. We're number one. We've set another record, and it's a big one. We've set another record. This is like almost gold medal. No, I'm not talking about Olympics. I'm talking about our trade deficit. If I'm getting this right, we hit the T. I think I'm getting this right for the year. This is a record, and I'm guessing it was almost $1 trillion. It was $1 trillion. Hey, congratulations, America! We just created jobs all around the world, and good for us. You know where we didn't do it? Right here. Which again is why I'm a big fan of Joe Biden and the idea of resourcing, reshoring, and building domestically our capacity to consume. And that's why I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is good to be with you as always. That's right. We set a record we don't want to have, I guess.
So am I getting this right? We hit the T. We got that. We finally got over it. Yeah.
Not a thing to look forward to. I was hoping this day would never come. It's the sign, as you indicated, it's the sign of a real challenge that we have in this country. And I'll just add a little context. One of the reasons for this is that during the pandemic, people have changed their spending patterns. And, out of every dollar that people would spend pre-pandemic, 55 to 60 cents of that would be on services, 40 to 45 cents on goods. Well, that's been totally flipped, and we're buying more goods than ever. The problem, as we know, is that particularly for consumer products and particularly for consumer products that we find at big box stores, which is where a lot of people shop, or online at Amazon, those are imports. And so the trade deficit is going to go up that way. And so having a Made in America strategy is very important as we move forward. And it shows that even when you have tariffs, as Trump put on China, that they don't necessarily act as a big wall necessarily, that there's a lot of other things that we need to do. I'm not saying that we should throw the tariffs out by any means. We should not, but we need to do more than that to have an opportunity to help level that a bit. And I'm under no illusions. We're not going to erase the trade deficit in a year. That's going to take a considerable amount of time to get to, because it's taken a long time to build up. But we got to start somewhere, and it starts with a good trade policy. But it's also, how do we make manufacturing more competitive and provide more incentives for consumers, the government, everybody to buy American-made products?
Yeah, I mean, what's it taken us 22 years to get here? Because the mass of our trade deficit comes from China, right? I mean, that's where we get most of our manufactured goods. And this is where it's a struggle for me, because I remember what it was like, years ago, and it's getting a little harder to remember back then. But I remember when things were, made in the U.S., when you could pick something up off the shelf and it'd go, oh yeah, this is made in, Springfield, Massachusetts, or this is made in Peoria, Illinois, or, the toys made in, Brattleboro, Vermont. Now, China, and that's your choice. And there is no choice. And we're told that, the free market you can decide. There's no free market. I don't get a choice on 90% of the things I buy.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And that's a point that's really underappreciated, is that thanks to, the digital economy, consumers have probably 15, 20, an unlimited number of choices if they want a cheap imported T-shirt. Okay, you have almost unlimited opportunities to find that. You have virtually no opportunity to find an American-made T-shirt, even though they are produced. They're just not sold on those big sites, and it takes some interesting entrepreneurs like American Giant and others to try to scale that up on their own, which is really hard to do. But what we've taken for everybody who values Made in America, whether it's because it means jobs or patriotism or sustainability or investing locally, quality or prestige, you're taking that option away from folks who want to spend their dollars that way.
You know, I had a guy on not too long ago, and it slips my mind, but you know, his idea was to get Amazon to put a Buy American button on their website, that where, you know, if you can filter out anything, why not be able to filter? I only want American-made products. I want American-sourced products. And again, this is one of those things Amazon's never going to do, but you know, I think they should.
Yeah. It's interesting because there are some kind of made in America retailers who have Amazon stores who sell made in America stuff, but it's hard to find on the Amazon site. And I know there's been some investment in creating search engines like that. In fact, Mark Cuban, you know, of Shark Tank fame and Dallas Mavericks owner, invested in a company that was trying to do that. But it's been very hard. There are a few brands that have that curate made in America products, and I can't say that they're there today, Rick, because I haven't looked. But I know in the past, for example, the Container Store or REI or some others like that have at least presented those made in America options front and center and have kind of curated them. But it's like finding a needle in a haystack. The algorithm works against you in many ways for that, and there has to be a change, because folks I talk to say, yeah, I'd at least like the option. I'd like to know what it is. I can't even find it. And that's the biggest problem for most folks.
Yeah, I know. When I used to go into the hardware store, you pick up a Stanley tool. You know, reliably, they used to be made in the U.S. Not so much anymore. Used to pick up Craftsman tools. Not so much anymore, because you at least had the option. Scary, sad, scary, and depressing stuff. Let's move along. Evidently, we have made an agreement with the Japanese. We're going to do something on the steel tariffs. This is a good idea.
Yeah, it is. And I say this as someone who believes very strongly in the steel tariffs. You know, the background here is that in 2018, Donald Trump imposed 25% across the board tariffs on steel and aluminum products coming from overseas, with a couple of exceptions. They were, you know, I think that they produced a pretty decent result for the U.S. industry. They provided a little bit of breathing space to make some investments that were long overdue to make facilities more efficient, to add some capacity in the United States instead of depending so much on imports. And so from that point, they were successful. They also brought on some retaliation from our trading partners. And that made things a little more challenging for other areas of the economy. The approach that Joe Biden has taken is to keep most of these steel tariffs, but with Europe, with Japan, to negotiate separate agreements that would put a quota in place. So what does this mean, basically? You know, tariffs apply to any amount of steel coming in at any level, as long as it's from an applicable country, of 25%. A quota says that the Europeans or the Japanese can send X amount of steel. Once they hit that target, they do have to pay a tariff. So it will help to keep down import volumes in the United States. And so from a perspective of having a bit of market certainty and a bit of assurance that there won't be a surge of cheap imports coming in, I think it's a good thing. It builds a sustainable strategy. And now we can enlist Japan, Europe in an effort to combat China much more directly. We were not in a position to do that before. We are now. And so from that perspective, I think it's beneficial as we look ahead. And I will say the Biden administration consulted closely with the steel industry, with steel workers on this before they reached this agreement, first with Europe last year and now with Japan.
So if I'm getting this right, they've got these quotas, they go above it, they got to pay a tariff. What stops them from going, we're going to send it somewhere else and then send it here? Is there a mechanism of tracking that to ensure that they don't do like the Chinese have been doing to get around stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with respect to Japan, there's what's called a melted and poured requirement. So the steel that's coming in to the United States to not be subject to the tariff or to it could be subject to a tariff if it's not melted and poured in Japan. Let me state that differently. And so there is some, and so that means it has to originate in Japan. It can't come from another country. And there are other mechanisms in place to prevent that transshipment as well. And so it does have those kinds of safeguards in it to make sure that there's none of this kind of like working around the edges to try to get through this this trade enforcement strategy.
Yeah. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Scott Paul. Scott's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Make sure you check that out. If you're just joining us, make sure you download the podcast so you don't miss a minute. You take the program on the go wherever you go. And also you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So, I'm looking at, the administration. Yesterday, they came out with their labor task force, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, and the idea of encouraging workers to be able to join and form unions, which I think is a great thing, and using the federal government to ensure that we move in that direction. Now they've put out a fact sheet on the Made in America stuff and what they're bringing in. And I think to this point, and it's been a short period of time, I'm impressed with what they've been able to accomplish in such a short period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think that if you would have stepped back before Joe Biden took office and you would have said, well, what are the couple of three things he's going to get done? And we'll be able to look back on. I doubt if a lot of people would have said he's going to create a surge in manufacturing investment, a surge in manufacturing jobs, and there's going to be more factory announcements than we can even keep up with. But that's kind of where we are. And some of that is good fortune because, the pandemic's getting a little bit better. It goes in waves, but it's gradually getting a little bit better. And we've been able to sustain economic growth because of some other economic policies. But I think the most important thing is there are market signals coming from the government, and there's intent about wanting to have a manufacturing strategy to make more things here and to make complex machines here too that have big supply chains, which means more jobs in more communities as well. And so just today, there was an announcement of an electric vehicle charging station manufacturer called Tritium that's going to build a U.S. Manufacturing facility that is Buy America compliant. That means it is very made in America. It's not just stuff coming in from abroad that will add hundreds of new jobs and will also be able to add to the charging infrastructure, which is going to be necessary for electric vehicles. And this comes on top of factory announcements we've seen in the last couple of weeks from Intel and Ford and GM, and the list goes on. But there's been a lot of it. And part of it is because there's this commitment to making sure that we're building a future that's manufactured in the United States. It is such a refreshing change, Rick, from what we've seen in the past. And also, I will just quickly add, of the types of promises that the last president, that Trump, made about factory openings. We remember the Foxconn announcement, all this fanfare about this massive factory opening that was going to create 20,000 jobs in Wisconsin. It is a dud. It is a dud. And it's more of a warehouse than anything else. There's hundreds, not thousands of people that are working there, and local communities are suffering because they've had to give, they've lost a lot of potential tax revenue. They've given a lot away to this company.
Yeah, they went all in.
Yeah. And so the Biden strategy, I think, is very has borne some fruit so far, and I think it's one of the most interesting, most welcome surprises of his presidency so far. You and I look forward to what's to come as well.
Yeah, well, you and I, we've talked about this stuff for years. I mean, it's got to be going on, 12, 15 years now that we've been talking about this. And I guess if you stay in the room long enough and you keep saying that manufacturing is a national security issue and that maybe we should make stuff, eventually someone's going to listen. And it only took a pandemic, a global pandemic, for us to wake up to the reality that maybe we should make stuff.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of forces at work here. Some of them are related to these unpredictable events like the pandemic or natural disasters. Some of it's related to increased political risk from having production in places like China. That hadn't erased offshoring entirely. And there's a ton of stuff coming from China, as we know from these trade figures still. But it certainly made a lot of firms think twice about doing that. Some of it is the fact that as people look to the United States, they know we have a good consumer market, we have a humming economy, and in order to serve it best, you should be close to your customers. Yeah. And so I think that there's been a number of these factors that have come into play that have made it. Plus, if you want to do business with the federal government now and you want to sell to the federal government or take advantage of some of this infrastructure money to supply those needs, there is thankfully a requirement that has to be made in America. And so that's going to drive some investment as well. But having that intent, Rick, having that strategy, I think is so important, and not pretending like it's some ridiculous, phony, invisible hand that's controlling all of this stuff, because it's not the case. There's lots of incentives. There's lots of other government machinations overseas that are making these decisions for them. I'd rather for us to be in the driver's seat and to say, this is what we want. This is how we're going to achieve it. And yes, it's going to take some public investment, but it's going to return dividends for every American. We're going to see a stronger middle class, and that's going to strengthen every part of the economy as manufacturing grows.
Yeah, and if we're going to move to renewable energies, if we're going to move to electric vehicles, you got to build this stuff here. And there's a lot of investment that needs to be made. And if you've got an active government investing in that, because the private sector is not going to, because there isn't a big enough return on them. Their right. entrenched interests are stay where we are. So we need that kind of investment. Real quick, in about 30 seconds, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Olympics because, we're seeing a lot of stuff there. I'm curious, your real quick thoughts.
Yeah, I just think that it's I think the Chinese Communist Party has shown its true colors. And I think people see right through all of that, from having a Uyghur athlete light the torch to everything else. Yeah. My hope is that we can get those American companies that you were talking about to do the right thing, because many of them haven't so far. They need to. They need to get on the right team. Yeah.
Good stuff. Scott, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
You bet, Rick. Great to be with you as always.
Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. We'll get links out. If you missed any of the program, get the podcast. You can get it anywhere where you get your podcasts and at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Each and every day, labor's history continues to be written. Such is the case in North Carolina. On this day in labor history, the year was 2014, which saw a massive protest in Raleigh, North Carolina. The protest was part of the Moral Monday movement. Moral Mondays started off as and continued as a series of protests against policies enacted by the Republican legislature and governor of North Carolina. These policies included restricting voting rights, changing tax policies to benefit the wealthy, and slashing unemployment benefits. Nearly 1,000 Moral Monday protesters were arrested in 2013. On this date, Moral Monday brought at least 80,000 people into the streets of Raleigh. The protesters had 5 demands. First was to secure pro-labor, anti-poverty policies that ensured economic stability. They also demanded quality public education, access to health care and environmental justice, reformation of the criminal justice system, and safeguarding voting rights. The North Carolina AFL-CIO has been a staunch supporter of the effort. American Federation of Teachers President Randi Weingarten made a trip to Raleigh for the protest. She said of the protest, people are searching for fairness, opportunity, justice, and real change. I believe that search can and should lead to the labor movement. Reverend William Barber II, president of the North Carolina NAACP, has been at the forefront of the Moral Monday movement. He addressed the huge crowd and declared, "You may have thought you were going to discourage us, but instead you have encouraged us. The more you push us back, the more we will fight to go forward. The more you try to oppress us, the more you will inspire us." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, in looking at the $1 trillion trade deficit, can you believe $1 trillion trade deficit? You know, can you imagine how much manufacturing we would have in this country if just a quarter of that, an extra, $250 billion in manufactured goods could be produced and sold in this country? Can you imagine the jobs? It's just bizarre to me. But still, you got companies that are looking to flee the shores. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. So inflation evidently is killing us. That's what they keep telling us. Inflation's killing us, and it's all Joe Biden's fault. And I keep saying, no, I'm not blaming Joe. I am not going to blame Joe Biden for our inflation problems. I'm not going to blame him for our supply chain problems. He's working on it. This stuff doesn't just happen. I think he's done a pretty darn good job to this point. What I said from the beginning, our inflation problems, one, oil prices through the roof. That's a huge driver of it. Automobiles, because we can't get the chips because we don't manufacture enough here. You want to blame our inflation problems on something? Blame it on, 40 years of supply side voodoo Reaganomics. Blame it on, 50 years of neoliberal trade and that nonsense. Blame it on that. Because that's what put us in this position where, hey, we can't make stuff anymore. Now I look at BP, British Petroleum, big oil company. They for 2021 posted $12.8 billion in profit. They're going to take $1.5 billion of that, and they're going to engage in share buyback program. And they're going to pay out a whole bunch of it in dividends to the very well-to-do. Now you go, well, they work really hard. You go, they had their biggest profit year in 8 years. And you go, but gas prices are at a real high rate. You go, yeah. Do you know why? Their profit level is high, the highest it's been in 8 years. This is what's known as good old-fashioned American greed and capitalism. Good old-fashioned American opportunism. Hey, we can blame someone else for doing something we were going to do anyway. And we're going to line our pockets doing it. And I can't believe we keep falling for it. You look at all of these stories coming out. Every day, another story coming out. CEO with a 30% raise. This company making, just obscene profits. You go, what, are you against profit? The obscene kind where you're gouging people? Yeah, weren't we told that there was something called competition to help keep the prices down? If we allowed to go to China, if we allowed companies to monopolize, that it was going to be better. I'm not seeing better, folks. I'm not. What I'm seeing is a lot of people underemployed, working 2 and 3 jobs to try and make ends meet. And yes, that's what's going on. Now you look at Amazon. I brought up Amazon in the last segment. And if Amazon's listening, and since I understand they're listening to everything now, because of Alexa or whoever, whatever the Amazon version of that is, they had, significant profits. In fact, they had a record $35 billion in profit. And did they pay the 21% federal corporate tax rate? Oh, no. No. In fact, in 2021, they paid a whopping 6.1%. Somehow they were able to avoid $5.2 billion in taxes. And you wonder why Jeff Bezos can take his phallic-looking rocket up into space and get his bathtub boat out of where it's being built by tearing down an old bridge, an iconic old bridge. but this isn't new because look, back in 2019, the company made $11.2 billion in profit and paid a whopping and an astounding zero in taxes. And you go, when was the last time you paid zero in taxes? Because we keep hearing, we're taxed enough already. Can't tax those rich people too much. Can't do it. Sorry. Because they'll do something else. It's nuts. And what we're ending up in this weird kind of world. And, I was looking at the task force, the Biden task force paperwork, the worker organizing and empowerment task force proposal. And in there are the like I said, the alligator jaws of inequality. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. You put that over to the top of union density continuing to go down, wealth of the millionaires and billionaires continue to go up, and you go, yes, there is a cause and effect there. As workers have less bargaining power, they are more desperate, and they are more willing to say, hey, I'm just happy to have a job and settle for the crappy wages, the diminished benefits, and the non-existent retirement that most people sadly have in this country. Which is why I'm thrilled to see right now you've got Starbucks workers, you've got cake makers, you've got people all across this country, and see out on the West Coast, you've got a general strike going on out in Oregon. You've got in Washington State, you've got all of these moments of people saying we've had enough. And we've given the rich and powerful so much. So when I saw this tweet put out by the folks over at the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum, which wasn't there when we went through in 2013 for our labor history tour, but I do want to get to in southern West Virginia, they put out a tweet saying that they're going to have a new online exhibit because they said for decades, many coal companies in Appalachia paid their miners primarily in a privately issued currency known as scrip. Their 16 tons, their online exhibit of company scrip and tokens, highlights the unique scrip coinage of the southern West Virginia coal fields. And look, they've got their own coupons and their own coins. They made their own currency, so that why? So that their workers could only shop in company stores, that they could charge them astronomical prices on and interest. You could only go to company doctors so that you could charge them astronomical prices and keep them indebted. They could only go to, company schools, anything you use money for, you had to get through the company. And the company had the monopoly on everything. You were solely dependent on them. And you go, well, Rick, that was so long ago. And I go, no, it wasn't so long ago. When I first moved to Pennsylvania, back in 1993, I started a job up in the Pocono area, and one of the guys I met there was probably I think he was about 10, maybe 15 years older than me, and he told me the story of his parents, who, when he got back from Vietnam, he had a little bit of money in his pocket, and he was able to take that little bit of money that he had gotten during his time there, and he was able to go and pay the debt to the company store, because his parents, in the 70s, in the early 70s, were still late 60s, early 70s, were still indebted to the company store. And he said that was the first time. And he said, he remembered it, like it was yesterday. He said, look, I was so proud because for the first time in like 100 years, his family wasn't in debt to the company store. And, you think about, that's just old time history. No. And I argue, we're heading into this direction now where, they're not giving us script anymore. They're not giving us, little funny looking tokens. They're not writing a tab at the general store and charging us outrageous rates. They're not giving us credit cards and debit cards and this kind of stuff and apps on our phone. So when a number of fast food places said, yeah, we're not going to write you paper checks anymore. We're just going to give you one of these cute little debit cards. You go, no, seen this movie, and it's a bad one. And then you find out, well, if you use your little card more than once or twice a month, then they start charging you fees. And if it drops below a balance, it's crazy. Because the rich and powerful always figure out how to line their pockets at the expense of the working class. And this is where, you go back to that history of these miners and other industries, but mostly the miners. And you look at what they did. They started their own hospitals. They started their own schools. They started their own stores. They began to organize around the idea that they can hold some of the power. This is one of those moments for me. This is one of those opportunities for working people. And to have someone like Biden in the White House who's saying, you know what, we're going to encourage people to collectively bargain. We're going to encourage people to come together. I love when the right goes, well, we voted for him because, he was going to unite the country. That crazy Tulsi Gabbard was one of them. I voted for him because he said he was going to unite the country. How do you unite a country when an entire political party was willing to almost burn the country to the ground? Walk me through that, because I'm kind of struggling with that one. Kind of struggling with it. But in looking at this, and I hope people will go and see the 16 tons exhibit with the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum. We'll try and get links out on how that happens. But they figured out how to take care of themselves, how to get things they needed, and well, try. Now, some good news today. You have 120 co-sponsors on Representative Jayapal's Medicare for All plan. Now, this isn't going to go anywhere because it's not going to make it through the Senate, probably not going to make it out of the House, but it's something that's important to get moved through and talk about, hey, how do we make sure that we get the health care that we need? How do we make sure we get education that we need as we're watching right now, them attempting to destroy it? That's the question. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line one. Alice, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am fabulous. What's on your mind?
Well, three things I wanted to touch on real quick. The first one was Cory Booker and the delegate from D.C. are trying to pass a bill to give the black soldiers who fought in the Civil War the Congressional Gold Medal, and I think that's a great idea. So I would like everyone to maybe contact their congressional representatives and say, hey, go for it. Yep. And then the second thing that I wanted to bring up was I just love this legitimate political discourse, and I've come to the conclusion that it goes along with the self-defense. You see, you go out, if you're a Republican or a Trumper, you go out and you have this so-called legitimate political discourse. And when the person tries to defend themselves from said discourse, then the person who started the discourse uses deadly force and claims self-defense.
I don't disagree with that. How dare you how dare you not agree with me? Now I'm going to have to bash your head in with this flagpole.
Exactly. And then you claim self-defense.
Yeah, because it's legitimate.
Goes together. Yeah. It was a legitimate political discourse. So I'm just waiting for the insurrectionists to decide that now they can claim, it was self-defense.
Excellent point. Anything else?
And then the third thing, if you had time, I wanted to just bring up real quick was, with all this, these, what do I want to say? Little conservative snowflakes complaining about the teachers. I've come to the conclusion we're just going to have to give an abbreviated version of history. You start with, well, the Pilgrims came to the colonies because they were on a search to expand their spiritual horizons. that way you don't bring up any religion or anything like that. And of course, because you can't talk about Native Americans because that falls under race. And, that's critical race theory. So you're going to have to say something, call them something like earlier intercontinental immigrants or something equally amusing. And then you're just going to have to bypass the Civil War entirely because, you'll have to talk about slavery or blacks, and that's critical race theory. You can't do that. So I think I'm going to write a history book and call it The History for Fragile White People or something.
There you go. It's not going to be. This won't be Howard Zinn's version of history. This will be. It'll be the Steve Bannon history or the Donald Trump history.
Yeah.
There you go.
Because you can't talk about religion because they get a hiss fit, and you can't talk about anything about Native Americans or blacks or anything like that. You're just going to have to wipe that all out, or somehow sanitize it. Call the Civil War a disagreement between different regional areas or something equally amusing.
There you go. Good stuff, Alice. I appreciate it. Always appreciate your thoughts.
Have a nice evening.
Great stuff, our good friend Alice. No, look, she's not wrong. Not wrong in the world that we live in now. I have hope as long as there are people like Alice walking around. And look, I've had conversations with people who get this, but they don't want to argue. They don't want to fight. And this is where I'm hopeful that the silent majority at some point goes, enough already, and starts voting these people out. I mean, because that's ultimately what it's going to take. The squeaky wheel seems to get too much of the grease right now, and nobody's saying, "Hey, sit down and keep it down." Something that needs to be done most certainly. Got a lot to get to in the next segment. Going to talk about Joe Biden's worker plan, and I love the fact that he's following through on what he said. Going to promote organizing, going to promote people joining and forming unions. When we come back, our good friend Phil Glover from the American Federation of Government Employees is going to be here to share some thoughts on the worker organizing and empowerment plan. If you've missed any of the program or if you're just now joining us, make sure you download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get the podcast. And it's Black History Month, so make sure you check out our Black History Month podcasts and share with your friends. Really, really great stuff. The most recent one is an absolute must listen. Quick break, right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That was the day copper miners in Butte, Montana went out on strike. Mine owners announced a $1 a day wage cut when copper prices slumped in the financial markets. Swayed by the power of the Seattle General Strike then in progress, miners associated with the Industrial Workers of the World and the Metal Mine Workers Union Local 800 formed their own Soldiers, Sailors, and Workers Council. They issued a call for a general strike. For days, area trade unionists honored picket lines, left their jobs, and held meetings to debate joining a general strike. The streetcar workers shut down public transportation for 5 days. Soldiers returning from the war helped to man the picket lines. The labor paper Butte Daily Bulletin reported the post-war economy had left returning war heroes penniless and working in dangerous mines. While solidarity was unanimous among workers, their unions had yet to pass formal resolutions. Immediately, Montana's Governor Sam V. Stewart called in the 44th Infantry to crush the strike. Infantrymen bayoneted 9 strikers when they tried to stop the anti-labor Butte Daily Post from being distributed. Spirits were high by the end of the first week as official voting began. Then the streetcar men went back to work, citing no grievances with their employer. Then the engineers followed. Finally, the IBEW caved. They worried the engineers would take their jobs as they had done in the 1917 strike. The IWW and Local 800 called off the strike, fearing continuation would be fatal. Though most of the troops were soon withdrawn, one company stayed to ensure labor peace at the local water and electric works. Butte would remain under federal military occupation until the end of 1920. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's some good news. Looks like the House has passed a bill to ease some of the trouble at the Postal Service. You know, we've been talking about this forever now. Again, this is not new. This is something that's been going on since the Bush era. The fact that the post office has to prepay the health care and the pensions like a gazillion years into the future. Nobody has to do this except the Postal Service. And I said from the beginning, what this was really about was destroying the Postal Service so they could saddle it with all kinds of debt and say, oh, look, it's losing money, and then privatize and profitize it so that they could rip off we the people with a massive land grab. Because understand, the post office has a ton of land all over this country and prime real estate that, you know, the Amazons of the world might not mind getting their hands on. So the vote really highly bipartisan, 342 to 92, and it's bipartisan in the Senate. So this may actually happen. We may actually might happen. We might get a functional post office that's actually doing what it's supposed to do. And maybe we get rid of DeJoy and some of the Trump appointees, and then we get a real post office. Oh boy, oh boy, there we go. Good stuff. And here to share some thoughts on, well, let's a little on the post office, but also President Biden's plan on how we're going to get people to join and form unions and encourage it, and all of that. I've asked our good friend Phil Glover to come talk with us. Phil is the International Vice President. Wait a second. No, he is the National Vice President of District 3 AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. Got to get that right. Phil, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate you having me on.
Anytime. No, I'm sorry I butchered your title. I got to get that right.
I'm
what do you think of this?
I'm not a title guy, Rick. It's okay.
What do you think of this? I mean, this is about damn time. This has been going on for over a decade. You know, it's a good thing.
Yeah, I believe I'm thinking 2006 was when they insisted that they overfund their pensions every year for like 90 years. Yeah, this is big. That's a big that's going to be a big turning point, I think, for our postal worker brother and sisters out there.
And, you know, hopefully we then go back and we undo some of the damage of the last administration, because look, a lot of people are really frustrated. The post office is, you know, it's hit or miss if you're getting things. You know, it's not what we've we've expected all of these years. It's not, you know, the service, it's not the speed. And it seems, and I guess accurately so, that under the last guy, you know, they deliberately did this. And they deliberately tried to break this. And I would argue because of the election, and also so they could privatize it.
Yeah, I think as they went to the mail balloting, to more mail ballots, there was definitely a plot to slow down the postal service and to eliminate overtime and weekend deliveries and all the other things that they did to cause a lot of problems with the voting. And, you know, then later they made that as an excuse of a reason to change the law on voting by mail. So hopefully these things get exposed and then they get corrected, and that's what you need.
Yep. So let's get to it. Let's get to the big task force.
Sure.
You got this task force, the Worker Organizing and Empowerment Task Force. They now have their 45-page report, 70 proposals. Is a good thing?
Oh, it's an excellent thing. It's certainly helpful to federal employees to be able to have more access to the workplace. There were a lot of agencies, and especially the last 4 years, that completely kicked us out of the office space. And then we couldn't even use break rooms during breaks to talk to members and to potential members. So this looks like it's going to correct a lot of that. We're hoping that the Trump, kind of the people that have burrowed into the government from the last 4 years, will be rooted out. That's been a significant problem, and it happens from administration to administration when you have that kind of change. So we're waiting to see how many of those people get ejected out of the federal government.
Yeah, whereas, and this is how this has been explained to me, and tell me if what I'm being told is wrong. Past administrations would fill people in spots, and those people were somewhat qualified. They may not be, ideologically one way or the other that we would want, but at least they had an understanding of what the functions were. Their goal wasn't to entirely destroy it. I'm told that, during the former guy's 4 years, it was all about putting people into those positions to destroy and gum up the system and really kind of break things down.
Well, I think there was and I don't remember the guy's name, but there was an architect to this for Trump, along with Bannon. But there was an architect that wrote all of this internal documentation in order to essentially grind the agencies to a halt, to eliminate their functions, and to cause a lot of problems with the federal government. So kind of as you said on the Postal Service, so that as government failed to function, people would demand service and they could privatize. This is an old, go back to Grover Norquist as one of the architects of that kind of system. So this is refreshing. What has come out, and I've read the pages. A lot of this is good stuff, giving us access to bargaining unit lists more easily, access to agency workplaces and break areas and those kind of things is going to help. And it really is going to matter if the secretaries that Biden has appointed make sure that these things happen out in the agencies. That's the big kicker.
Now, this is just for federal employees and federal contractors. And as I'm reading through it, the goal of this is to ensure that the federal government is a quote unquote model employer. That, we pay decent wages, decent benefits, good working conditions, all of the things that I believe you should have on a job. And that to be something that the rest of us look to and go, hey, how do we get that job? Or how do we get those conditions? And then the rest of us in the private sector go, hey, we should be organizing to get that.
I think that's right. And it's, if you read down through this, you see for instance, the $15 minimum wage. There's a lot of folks that don't realize that there are federal employees that work in, let's say, the post exchange on military bases, or that work in the Patriot Cafe in a VA hospital. They weren't making really much more than a very small minimum wage, $7.25, whatever it was. This may lift them up to $15, which is really good. We think that's a really good positive for those people.
Yeah, if I remember right, the servers in the Senate dining room at one point were making just above minimum wage, and you go, this would be a massive increase. In fact, I saw a study done not too long ago said that throughout the federal government, this kind of an executive order would raise the wages of something like 390,000 workers across the federal government. Does that sound right?
I think between contractors and federal employees, that's the right number. And that's great. I mean, I think really we have a lot of people that are, a lot of people enter government at GS 1, 2, some 4s. This is a helpful thing. I think it's really good and it should push wages up in other areas. They may have to look at reclassification, and move more skilled workers. I don't want to use that term because I think everybody's skilled in their way and their function, but a way to push up wages across the board certainly would help.
It certainly would. Now, again, back to this idea of being the model employer. because, I'm looking at this and as I think where you and I would both agree, if you see someone who's doing better than we are, we go, hey, how do we get that? But we both know there are people in our society who are going to go, well, I don't make $15 an hour. Why should they? And I know there's no answer to how to deal with that other than just to, maybe a good slap upside the back of the head. But, how do we move forward on that?
Well, I mean, communication certainly is part of it. The shows like yours are part of it. These, people like when the big push for fast food workers to go to 15. Well, I'm a paramedic and I'm only making 17. Well, you know what? You should be making 25. That's the problem, is that nobody seems to care about a CEO making 400 times what their average worker makes. That's okay. But a worker makes $3 more an hour. Oh my gosh, that's just crazy. And I think you just have to keep pounding away at that, on social media and in media like this, and just talking to your buddies. I have friends that are more, let's say, center right than I am, and we get into these discussions sometimes over a beer, and you talk about, look, it helps everybody. It's shown to help everybody to move wages up for the lowest paid workers, and people don't believe that, but when you really look at the statistics and the data, it shows that's what's happened.
Yeah,
so,
no, you're right. I mean, the reality of that statement, a rising tide lifts all boats, unless you're in a rowboat and Jeff Bezos' is, $500 million bathtub boat comes smashing you into the dock, that's a problem. And that's what's happening. We've got so many of these giant, to use that analogy a little bit more, you got so many of these giant ships coming into port that the rest of us are getting crushed. And one of the things I thought was important in this thing is they've got the alligator jaws of inequality in there. As union density has gone down, inequality has gotten worse. And for me, the one way we solve a lot of our problems, Phil, and I know you're going to agree with me, is that we give people the ability to collectively bargain for better wages, hours, and conditions, and those alligator jaws will come back together, and they're not going to snap back together like may happen at some point if things get much worse.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, if you look in here, you're going to see where it says expand collective bargaining rights for TSA, or transportation security workers. And those folks have had it rough since they were put together in 2004, and they didn't give them union rights under the federal sector. So the one thing I do have some concerns with is this is new. In June, Secretary Mayorkas directed TSA to come out with a Title V system. And here we are 8.5 months later, and TSA still doesn't have that determination. Now, I'm not sure what the administrator at TSA is doing, but I hope this report kind of reemphasizes to him that he needs to get that determination out so that our members in TSA can then bargain collectively, get their Title V rights and pay, and the things that they're supposed to get that the rest of us in the federal government generally get.
No, I would never want to be a TSA officer. I want no part of that. Just because you have to deal with, the worst people half the time. I want no part of it, and I'm grateful that there are folks who do, and they should have the dignity and respect of a reasonable wage, and decent benefits, and some voice in the place where they spend their time. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Phil Glover. Phil is District 3 National Vice President of AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. AFGE.org, the website, if you want to check out more on that. But, Phil, in looking at this, and look, there's a lot this administration, they inherited that were much more pressing than some of the issues that I may want to be focused on. But, at some point, you got to get around to them. You got to get around to cleaning some of the house and getting rid of some of the old dead weight, and then moving the ship in a better direction. Do you see that happening quick enough, or are you as concerned as I am that we could get to the end of this term and still have people from the former administration?
Well, we had this problem coming out of, when we got the Obama administration. I was fortunate about a week and a half ago when President Biden was in Pittsburgh, I was able to go and be part of that event at Mill 19. And so I got an opportunity to take just a few minutes with him. And I just told him, I said, I hope, you will direct someone in the administration to really look at these holdovers. We have this Social Security administrator in Region 3. She's, just been anti-union the entire time with our local there. We have 2 people on the street at that local from their executive board. And I was able to mention to him, they were supposed to reopen their contract in SSA. They still haven't done it. So I did have a few minutes, and I hope, and then I spoke to Senator Casey and a couple of his staff on the way out the door. But, you take your shot and you try to keep the pressure on that you need these things done. Yeah. And we're doing that through members of Congress. We're certainly doing it through the Senate, and anybody else that we can get to speak to the administration. We're trying to do that. No, good stuff. Last line of questioning I've got for you, because you said you're in Pittsburgh. You got to see the president when he was in Pittsburgh there. You weren't on the bus, were you? No, unfortunately, I was not on the bus. And I wasn't wearing shorts either out on the bridge. Because, this is one of the accomplishments, I think, of the administration. You got this bipartisan bill pushed through. Interestingly enough, that the day the president's coming to Pittsburgh, you guys collapse a bridge. Well, you know how those engineers are, and some of those guys, I don't know, they're, or the Teamsters, I don't know, Rick, maybe it was the Teamsters got to that bridge, but, and I'm only kidding. No, I had someone ask me if I believe that they did it on purpose. I'm going, what kind of crack are you on? Yeah, not over Frick Park. I don't see that happening. But I will tell you, though, and we've brought this up before. We were going to speak about this, I think, last week, but our Department of Energy people out there in Pittsburgh, a lot of the infrastructure and energy pieces are going to go through federal employees at the national labs, the carbon capture stuff, all of the things that are going to be coming through there, the electric charging station infrastructure. And we did mention to the Biden administration, they're down 300 employees at that site. And they need some direct hiring capability to get people back on board, because a lot of people bailed out. A lot of our scientists, a lot of our tech people, very educated folks left those places during the Trump administration. So we need to get them back, and we need to get them on site to get that. If he wants to really expand that program, we want to be there to help him do it. Yeah, we need to undo the brain drain of those 4 years and get qualified people back to do the work we need. Phil, I appreciate the time. It's always great talking with you. Always enjoy your expertise and thoughts on things. Thanks so much. It's good to see you. Thanks, Rick. Good stuff. Phil Glover, AFGE District 3 National Vice President. Make sure you check out the website, afge.org. I'm going to take a quick break. If you missed any of the program thus far, the podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, grab it, The Rick Smith Show, or go to thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that a 3-man American astronaut crew returned to Earth from an 84-day mission at the Skylab. They were the first crew to spend so long in low Earth orbit up until that time. The crew also returned with a different kind of first. They had launched the first space strike in history. The all-rookie crew was scheduled for an arduous work schedule at the space station. When one member fell ill, they began to fall behind schedule on their long list of tasks. From the ground, NASA Mission Control urged them to catch up by working through meals and scheduled rest times. Tensions mounted as the 3 men were monitored at every moment. The commander of the trip tried to explain the crew's exhaustion, saying, "On the ground, I don't think we would be expected to work 16 hours a day for 85 days. And so I really don't see why we should even try to do it up here." 6 weeks into the trip, the Skylab 4 crew had had enough. They turned off the communication radio connecting them to Earth. They took an unscheduled day off.
When the communication link came back on, the commander issued the group's demands, saying, "We need more time to rest. We need a schedule that's not so packed. We don't want to exercise after a meal. We need to get things under control." NASA agreed to stop pushing so hard. The first space strike was over, and the mission went forward on better terms.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So lots of fun and entertainment going on in the world of the politic. And I point to the great state of Missouri, where evidently the modern-day Bonnie and Clyde, I can't believe these two morons, or I should update it, Karen and Brad. I guess Brad is the male version of Karen. I just found that out. Tells you how far behind I am. But Karen and Brad are back in the news because Brad, our new Brad, you may remember this couple. They were the ones with the guns, the pink shirt and the AR-15, and the woman with the little, pea shooter waving it around as the people of color walked by. Pardoned by the governor there, all kinds of insanity. Now I guess this guy's running for Senate. The big news, however, the bar has put him on kind of probation. Don't do bad things again there, Ken. And here to share some thoughts on, that and everything else we can bang around. I've asked our good friend Tim Hogan to come talk with us. Tim is the chief cook and bottle washer over at Heartland Signal. You can check out their website, heartlandsignal.com. Also, our radio affiliate on WCPT 820. Thank you guys for tuning in. Tim, thanks for taking time for us.
It's great to be back, Rick.
So let's go through it. We've got the modern day Bonnie and Clyde here with the guns and the pea shooters. Oh, the right wing heroes. How are they doing there in Missouri?
Both disciplined today for that and what they've done there. It's an example of sort of the faux populism that they lean into and think will help them in Missouri. Look, I don't think the McCloskeys, Mark McCloskey, really had or stands a chance in the Missouri Senate primary. He's up against Eric Greitens, the former governor who has his own scandals related to accusations of sexual abuse. So really up against some of the best and brightest on the Republican side there. But the fact that he, came to fame for brandishing weapons at protesters, and then his next thought was, maybe I should run for the United States Senate, tells you a little bit about how some of those Republicans view their base and how that made him a public figure in Missouri, and somehow he believed that was going to skyrocket him to get a Senate seat in the world's greatest deliberative body. But that is, I guess, where we are these days.
No, it is where we are. He had his moment of fame. The right wing, outrage candy machine was spewing out nickels, and he thought, hey, I can just throw my name out there, put my hat in the ring, and the money will flow in. And what I find interesting is those people, it appears that the Trumpkins and the folks who like this, they aren't getting the money that they were expecting. And I'll tell you, I'm hoping that they all get the nomination. I'm hoping they're all going to be running, and I hope they get nothing, and I hope they get slaughtered in the fall.
Well, look, I mean, there are Democrats who are running for that Senate seat in Missouri. It's worth us remembering, that is a seat that Claire McCaskill once held. It is a seat that Jason Kander ran for and came very close to beating Roy Blunt, who's now retiring, and which is why this seat is open. And someone like a Lucas Kuntz, who grew up in Missouri, who understands rural politics in the state, whose family struggled with healthcare costs when he was young and his sister got sick, is the type of candidate that can run a really competitive race in this state. and he's been outspoken on a whole lot of things. One, he was one of the first people to push for banning stock trades while members of Congress serve in Congress, which makes a whole lot of sense. And he's carrying a message that I think resonates in the state too, which is people in rural America, in rural Missouri, are sick of seeing themselves plundered by large corporations, large farming corporations. And it's just a matter of, how do Democrats approach them? How do Democrats recapture some of the rural populism that put Democrats in power and got them Senate seats and House seats and local state legislature seats across the country in these types of communities?
Yeah, I know. And I've been saying that for a long time. Democrats, they walked away from rural communities at their own peril. And, this whole, everyone wants to be the mayor of Wokistan. At the end of the day, I'm talking about how do you make people's lives better? And I think that translates into urban, rural, it doesn't matter, suburban. How are we going to make people's lives better? How are workers going to get better wages, hours, conditions? How are kids going to get educations without being saddled with a lifetime of debt? How are we going to get health care in the moment that, we need it? Even, Hercules, the crazy right-wing shill Kevin Sorbo came out yesterday with a tweet going, so we're going to give everything away? Why don't we give vaccines and insulin? And why don't we do those things? Why is it that we can get the vaccine that our government paid for and invested in to make sure we're healthy? Why can't we get the other stuff too? Their Herculaneum.
Right. Well, exactly. And it's also, when we approach those voters, it's a sort of a knee jerk, I think, for Democrats sometimes to say, well, we have a really good number that shows you that if we pass this policy, it will help you. But we have to approach rural voters as people who have grown up in those communities, who view a lot of public policy through a lens of rural consciousness, and to be able to put people on the ticket who they identify with, who they see as people who would potentially fight for them. And this is a different policy area, but in the realm of education, it's a good example in South Dakota, right? What did Kristi Noem do last week? Well, she passed a Senate bill that's an anti-trans athlete bill. And one of the state senators in South Dakota held a press conference, made some really good points, which was, this is the cornerstone of your education policy in a state where teachers' salaries are 50th out of 51st, where we don't invest in early childhood education whatsoever, in a state where we are number one in terms of the share of people who graduate college with student debt. Those are the types of messages that I think people can get behind because they realize how that impacts them. Those are real things that are part of economic survival for them. And it's being able to find the right candidates and people who can speak to communities and point out the hypocrisy on the right, that you're not really doing anything for them. You're passing culture war legislation, and that's it.
Yeah, there's no policy there. And look, Republicans gave up on policy a long time ago. In the 2020 election, they were very clear. They didn't even bother putting out a platform. They just basically said, whatever dear leader wants, dear leader gets. And look what it's gotten us as a country. A party that's, eating itself, that was willing to, attempt to overthrow our government, full of people who will defecate and urinate on our Capitol floor. Huge problems. But look, I guess I look at this and it's the people in it. And I look at someone like Ron Johnson, if I want to move the switch over to Wisconsin. Ron Johnson's somebody who's not going to make people's lives better, especially workers. And, for me, I went on this long tirade the other day over the Postal Service vehicles. There was a contract that was given to an American company to build union-made, American-made vehicles for the Postal Service. And the first thing this Oshkosh Begosh company does is we're going to move to South Carolina, where we can get the most exploitable labor possible in the country. And Ron Johnson doesn't seem to be all that upset about it.
No, I mean, he said on Saturday over the weekend at a parent, quote unquote, parent empowerment rally at a press gaggle, that the issue isn't that there aren't enough jobs in Wisconsin. I think there are quite a few people who would, take umbrage with that. But he said today on TV, look, I've been very good for the people of Wisconsin on this issue. In fact, we've sent billions of dollars in federal contracts to this company. Well, okay, that's the point. If you are sending, or you've served as a senator, and there has been an investment in federal contracts that this Oshkosh company has, then you should also be fighting to make sure that those jobs are kept in state. You don't just stop when the company gets the federal contract, if people don't get employed in Wisconsin as a result, then what's the point? And it brings me back to some of the, blowback that Johnson took when we found out that in 2017, he was kind of holding back from supporting the Trump tax legislation. And people kind of looked and were like, well, what is he doing exactly here? And we find out later it's because he was waiting for a certain corporate classification to make its way into the legislation so some of his wealthiest donors could get a kickback. They invested $20 million in supporting his campaign. Well, they got $200 million in tax cuts as a result of that legislation. So it's just amazing to me that someone like Senator Johnson can say, well, look, I've served as a senator. They've gotten billions in federal contracts. That's not the point. That's not who you're supposed to be fighting for. You're supposed to make sure that people can get those jobs in Wisconsin, not South Carolina.
Yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. You go, hey, look, I brought home the bacon. You didn't let the neighbor eat it. I mean, it's kind of a stupid thing to say, but look, I think Johnson's not afraid of the voters because I think he knows the gig is up. I think he knows things are rigged in their favor. They've done enough to attempt to suppress the vote. There's enough of that, those roadblocks in the way that they've been building for the last decade, that I think he feels insulated from being held accountable.
And, I talked about this a little bit previously. I think it was around this time last week, he held another telephone town hall. He loves holding telephone town halls, which, I guess good constituent service, but maybe deliver for your constituents as well. Saying that, look, all of these towns that we vote in, he was talking to a voter who was skeptical about whether or not his vote would count, because guess what? Some people do listen to Ron Johnson and they buy the lies that the election is rigged and that their votes aren't going to be counted. And Johnson said, like, look, a lot of these smaller towns, Plum City, Oshkosh, really good election administration. The problem is when you get to Democratic strongholds like Milwaukee, and that is a dog whistle, not disguised as a dog whistle, that is a foghorn. Yep. And that is part of it, is to be able to question the vote counting in areas like that. And you know why that took some time? Because there are way more people in Milwaukee, and because the legislature in Wisconsin does not allow those ballots to be counted until election day. So yeah, there's a lot more work to be done there. And the reality is Ron Johnson knows this. He was caught undercover. There's video of him saying the reason that Donald Trump lost Wisconsin is because he got fewer votes. He understands the reality, but he's just not willing to tell his constituents the truth.
Yeah, and I would also argue the reason it takes so long is because they don't have the same number of resources per capita. I mean, we get the same dynamic here. You've got Milwaukee, Pennsylvania's got Philadelphia. We had a governor in 2010 who, when he was running, he was asked, how do you think you'll do? He goes, well, if we could just keep the vote down in Philly, we'll be okay. And it's the same kind of foghorn that you're talking about. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Tim Hogan. Tim is the executive editor over at Heartland Signal, heartlandsignal.com, also with our radio affiliate WCPT there in Chicago, AM 820. Now, I did want to get your thoughts on the Illinois governor and the gubernatorial candidate. I want to get first. Let's go to the candidate. This Richard Irvin, who I guess someone asked him, had the audacity to ask him a position where he stands on abortion, and he had I guess the typical Republican line now, right?
Well, look, they asked him if he thought that there were any exceptions in cases of rape or incest or life of the mother. And in this interview, he repeats the exceptions back to the interviewer, but doesn't say that he necessarily believes that those are the exceptions. And then the reporter, in a very sensical way, asks, okay, well, are those the exceptions that you believe in? You can hear someone yell from off camera, one of his handlers, and then he kind of looks over, he looks back, and then just says, I think we're done here, which is remarkable. How can you run for office, particularly in a state like Illinois, and not know the answer to that question?
Yeah, yourself? But dude, didn't you just see Florida Governor Ron DeSantis when asked about, do you support Nazis? Do you condemn Nazis? And him saying, we're not doing this?
They're not hard questions to give straight answers to.
Not hard at all. Now, I do like your governor. I like the governor there in Illinois. J.B. Pritzker, and he had a conversation the other day going on about how Democrats have made some really good investments in trying to solve crime and reduce violence and doing some stuff like that. Took a couple shots at Republicans, though, that I thought well deserved and we should be doing more of, especially on the national level when they didn't help with any of the infrastructure. But boy, are they taking credit for it.
I mean, it is Ashley Hinson, who's a representative in Iowa, is someone we watch very closely because she's done this 4 times or so now, where she puts out a statement touting investments in water infrastructure or any local project. And she voted against that legislation. I mean, look, Build Back Better was not signed into law, but it did get voted out of the House and that includes provisions to, cap costs for childcare. She also voted against that legislation, and then hours later held a teletown hall with constituents about how can we lower the cost of childcare. Let's think about ways to do this. She literally just voted against legislation to do it, which is remarkable. But to your point about Governor Pritzker, yeah, and this is something that Democrats need to call out, both on the education front, but also on the crime front, both in states and nationally. In the American Rescue Plan, there was funding for community-oriented policing. There was funding to get schools back open, and not a single Republican voted for it. So there's just absolutely no excuse to allow ourselves to be bludgeoned with this issue when we're the only ones who voted for funding for police departments and who voted for funding to open schools.
And what I don't get is why Democrats don't just hammer on that. I understand Republicans are much better at message discipline. They're much better at attack. Democrats are always trying to get stuff done. I get that. But at some point, you got to get on the same page and go, yeah, look at all the stuff we're doing and getting no help, by the way.
Right. No, I agree. And it's also a matter of, look, President Biden has passed a lot of legislation, successful legislation, with the slimmest of slim margins in Congress. And I think what we did at the beginning when we won those 2 Georgia Senate seats, it was sort of like the sky is the limit. We shifted the Overton window. There was a lot that we could do. But we still got, and look, Build Back Better, still not passed. Debatable about what will happen with the pieces of that legislation, if any portion of it's going to move forward. But we still got things done, a historic investment in infrastructure, passing the American Rescue Plan, getting checks out to families, having a child tax credit for families that needed it. Is it perfect? No. I mean, approving judges at a record pace, which is a little bit under the radar, but is so important as we see a lot of these issues come in front of courts and judges. It's something that we should be touting.
Absolutely. We should be hammering on this at every level. But Tim, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. Great work you guys are doing over there at Heartland Signal. I hope people will check out the website, heartlandsignal.com. We'll get links out on social media on how you can do that. Appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, Rick.
Great stuff. Our good friend Tim Hogan. Make sure you check out the work that they're doing right there. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you get the podcast, share with your friends, all that stuff. Follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show, Facebook, Twitter, all of that. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show. We're working.
multimillionaires have forced low-wage policies on food preparers, denied health coverage for them, and lobbied to kill proposals to provide paid sick leave. So, a kitchen worker coughs because he or she is infected with coronavirus, but doesn't know it since the worker has no health care coverage for testing. Even though running a fever, the staffer must come to work or lose the job. A few days later, a multimillionaire sneezes because, well, COVID-19 doesn't distinguish between rich and poor. The very proposals that plutocrats have been blocking for years, like living wages, Medicare for all, home health care, and others, are exactly what a sane government would adopt to avoid the consequences of inequality that now confronts every American. This is Jim Hightower saying the actual disease that's forcing social distancing on our country is the widening separation of rich elites from the rest of us, and the cure is a national push for renewed social cohesiveness. The catastrophic spread of COVID-19 reveals a truth we too often deny. We are a species